You just try me out. The question is that the proposed expenditure be agreed to. I call the member for Durack.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker, and let's hope I can now lower the tone in the chamber. Thank you. Maybe improve it, maybe lower, but let's hope I can get some attention. My question is the Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister, and it relates to how the Abbott government is working to close the gap between Indigenous and non-Indigenous school attendance rates. But first, I'd like to provide some context on this, particularly with respect to my electorate of Durack. As the Parliamentary Secretary and I know, to get ahead in life, children and young adults need to build a strong foundation through our education system. To achieve this, however, we must first get children and young adults to school. The Durack electorate has the third highest proportion of Indigenous students, so ensuring that this education gap is significantly reduced in the short term and rates of attendance are equal in the long term is a key priority of mine. Unfortunately, in Durack, Indigenous students attending school is not the norm, it's the rarity. Often, this is due to dysfunction in students' home lives. Without structure and discipline, this then leads to a high prevalence of truancy. In Fitzroy, Derby and Wiluna in particular, a significantly high level of truancy has already been identified by this government and the Australian Curriculum, Assessment and Reporting Authority, which highlights non-attendance cycles in schools. This authority identified that the average annual attendance rates of students attending Fitzroy Valley District High School between 2008 and 2013 was only 62%. This rate was marginally better at the Derby District High School with 69% and 65% at the Wiluna Remote Community High School. What these schools have in common is that they are all remote and have a large Indigenous population which is often transient. However, this non-attendance cycle was also identified at the Carnarvon Community College, a school which is located in a much higher regional hub, which had an attendance rate of 68% in 2012. I'm also saddened that the Roebourne District High School in the Pilbara region had one of the worst attendance rates in the country of 53% in the same year. This government and the wider Australian community have an expectation that every child has access to and attends school every day. But we need to work collaboratively to achieve this. Now, I do have some good news. Despite these concerning statistics, I'm pleased to say that in Broome, which is a key regional centre in Durack, with a high number of Indigenous students, there are many success stories in the education sphere. I've previously acknowledged the success of the Broome Senior High School and its principal Saeed Amin and his staff, whose hard work and dedication saw this school as the WA School of the Year in 2012. In the same year, the school had a 100% success rate for university offers for those students who were studying university courses. Another success story is the local TAFE in the Kimberley, which is called the Kimberley Training Institute, or KTI. KTI is a leading vocational education and training provider in the Kimberley region, which runs courses out of Broome and Kununurra. It aims to provide the skills and knowledge students need to enhance their employment opportunities. The fantastic work of KTI was recognised last year when it received 2 major accolades at the WA Training Awards. Visual arts lecturer Jackie Cheng was awarded Best Trainer in Western Australia, while the KTI was awarded Best Large Training Provider. This is a significant achievement that I commend all staff and students for. It is therefore clear that all students in Durack, no matter their age, race or social status, have the ability to access high-quality education through our schools and service providers. We just need to get these kids to school. This leads me to my question. Can the Parliamentary Secretary please outline the government's approach for improving Indigenous attendance rates at schools across Australia and in particular in regional and remote areas?
I call the Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the member for Durack for this question on what is a critical area, and can I commend her for her commitments to her constituents in her electorate, but more broadly to Aboriginal people across Australia. I know she has a very passionate commitments to want to see the advancement of Aboriginal people and wanting to see the gap closed in this country, and I commend her for that. The question she raises is a critically important one and concerns school attendance and education attainment. And as I said at the outset, this is our top priority in the Indigenous Affairs portfolio, and therefore one of the top priorities for the government, is to lift the school attendance rate, because if children aren't at school, then by definition they're not going to be learning. And if they're not learning at school, then it's so much harder to get employment afterwards, and it's likely to lead to a life on welfare. So it starts with school attendance. And at the moment, the school attendance rates, particularly in remote areas, as the member for Durack outlined, are sometimes at catastrophic levels. In fact, they are in some schools as low as 37%, the attendance rate. 37%. And if you actually looked at, I think, the most important measure in this area of how many kids are attending at least 80% of the time, that figure is even smaller. So it's a very significant problem, and we don't underestimate the challenge which we have to support schools, to support the Indigenous leaders, and to support children to be able to go to school and to learn. The most important measure that which we have introduced to date to tackle school attendance, particularly in the remote areas, is the Remote School Attendance Strategy. Now, in simple terms, that means providing employment opportunities for local quality people to act as attendance officers, and in the mornings to go around, knock on the doors, encourage the families to get their young son or daughter onto the minibus and to take them to school, and to ensure that they're at school during the day, and to encourage those children to get home safely at the end of the day. Now, this has been rolled out now in 73 schools, 12 of which are in Western Australia, most of which are in the member for Durack's electorate. 40 of those schools were introduced, 40 of those schools had these student attendance officers introduced in Term 1. A further 33 were introduced in Term 2. And I can report, Mr Deputy Speaker, that so far it has had some substantial results and substantial improvements. In some places, in the Northern Territory, for example, the number of children in these schools where we have the attendance officers in place is now up 17% on last year. 17% on last year. A quarter of all schools in the Stage 1 phase have had student attendance rate increases of between 15 and 25 percentage points, which is extraordinary that any school can have that type of increase at all, but it actually shows that in a quarter of the schools we're having tremendous results from these student attendance officers working with the local communities, working with families to get their children to school. 3/4 of the schools have had improvements in their student attendance rates. Now, this is not easy. There's still a quarter of the schools that haven't seen much improvement, and there's a number of reasons for that. And we constantly get advice from the student attendance officers as to what is going on in those schools and to what can be done next to try to improve the student attendance rates. And the member for Durack identified some of the issues which they have to tackle, whether it be parties going on at night, alcohol abuse or substance abuse, including of the students themselves, which make it so much more difficult. There's mobility issues where young students can be more mobile than non-Indigenous students and maybe in a different community at a particular point in time. All these create challenges, but we are determined, Mr Deputy Speaker, to continue the rollout of the Remote Students Attendance Strategy, to monitor it closely, to work with the local leaders in those communities, because at the end of the day it has to be done with those local leaders and to ensure that student attendance rates lift. If we can't get student attendance rates higher, students won't be learning, and if they're not learning, then their prospects for employment are so much more difficult.